Hello, everybody. This is William, the community manager for Althea, and I'm here today with CEO Deborah and CTO Justin of Althea, and we're just going to be talking a little bit about the year in review 2021 and then what lies ahead in 2022. And we can start right off. I'm going to pass over to Justin for a look at 2021.
Yeah, so we definitely did a lot in 2021, and really our biggest our biggest project has been development and launch of Gravity Bridge. And I still remember this very clearly. It was late 2019, and we had just gotten the router payment software stable and in a really good spot. And the question was, well, what are we tackling next? And Deborah calls me up and says, Justin, we need to build the ETH to Cosmos bridge. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can see that. We need it, but it's going to be hard and it's going to take forever. So, I mean, a year is not forever. So I think we did pretty good. So that was really our past year, was development, release, and launch of Gravity Bridge. And I'm very excited that we were able to launch the Gravity Bridge blockchain with more than 100 validators for the very first block in December of last year. And that sets us up in a good position to launch the Althea blockchain this year. And of course, the Althea blockchain, like many other Cosmos-based blockchains, will be using the Gravity Bridge to bring tokens over from Ethereum and sort of provide liquidity. And this will let Althea have a sovereign blockchain with that is focused purely on telecom and stability, without the extra complexity of Gravity Bridge being rolled into Althea itself, and with the advantage that aggregating that liquidity flow to and from Ethereum provides in terms of cost. So most specifically, this will allow users to access liquidity from Ethereum at a fraction, and by a fraction, I'm talking like 1/100th, 1/1000th of the gas price that would be otherwise possible if we had Gravity Bridge solely on Althea. So instead, the entire Cosmos community can aggregate its sort of inflows and outflows from Ethereum, and that allows them to all share a single gas price. So, the more people that are on the bus, the better the mileage per person. So that's sort of how that works. Let's see. What also happened last year is that since our router and payment and billing and sort of the mesh network software itself finally reached a stable state, and a state where we really didn't have to worry about it or think about it or look at it, we grew 10x in our user count over the course of the year. And this is really without focusing on new users as our sole thing. So that's what was really impressive, is that there's a lot of demand for the product that so there's a lot of demand for internet service. There's a lot of demand for people who want to control their own infrastructure and have the ability to not just wait for somebody else, not be like, oh man, my internet's terrible, it's impacting my life. Well, I just better sit here and wait. That is not the way we do things. And Althea it empowers people to have better service on their own terms. So now going into 2022, we have a lot of exciting things we're working on. We just started KeyLTE development in 2021, and in 2022, we're going to actually start to get to use it and really take our mesh networking software to the limit and start mixing and matching connection types in ways that are really exciting. But I'm going to pass it on to Deborah for more forward-looking stuff and talk about the year ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much, Justin. I mean, it was a whirlwind of a year last year, and really exciting to see Gravity launch. And I think also what's been really heartening for me as well is to see such a great community we have of validators and community members in Gravity Bridge that now have taken that project and become involved with it, and are it's going to live, beyond what we're doing here at Althea, and that's really exciting. So if folks want to find out more about that project, there's a Gravity Bridge Discord, and there's a website at gravitybridge.net. Will, maybe you can throw those things in the chat later for folks to find out more about that. But yeah, as Justin said, we really spent last year thinking about setting up those foundations for scaling. And, the 10x growth was, so almost happened, by accident, just because we can't contain, the level of growth that, people are excited about Althea. And in our existing networks too, I think what's been really exciting to me to see is that they do grow organically. People are excited about the service. And what's also exciting to me is that we recently acquired a fixed wireless network that was running a legacy type structure before. And every time we introduce the Althea software and protocol and firmware into that, we get more visibility. The consumers have a better experience because we don't artificially throttle. The traffic shaping and queuing network wide is better. There's just a natural alignment between a user of the protocol and a participant in the protocol, whether that's from an infrastructure or funding perspective. And it's just really great to see these things really viscerally with people that use the internet for their home connection. We have a fire station, we have emergency management, we have many businesses that count on the Althea protocol working all the time. And we were in kind of at the end of 2020, early part of 2021, we built one of our most challenging networks where essentially no other network could go before this. This network down in Southeast Oregon in the Warner Valley, which is this long, 50-mile stretch of canyons and valleys, and to see that come to life and be stable throughout the last year and really provide for that community who had kilobits a second before Althea was able to provide service is just really exciting. So sorry, I get a little sidetracked on that. I feel like it's really rewarding. I mean, we do a lot of work on the development side, but to see that in real life and the impact it makes on real people, so exciting. So what we did in 2021, just to recap, was a lot of foundational work. Gravity Bridge interoperability between the Ethereum ecosystem and Cosmos. And then systematizing the rollouts of Althea networks, right? What does it look like to take a legacy network and, bring Althea in and make that better? What does it look like to figure out what the, right market is? How do you start? How do you market it? How do you talk to people? Like all of those things, we now feel are at this point now that we can take them and scale, parallelizing different networks at the same time. And then I think what you'll see across 2022 is also now we can start bringing in partner networks that can then start running the protocol with a predictable amount of success, right? So now we can say, hey, you're in this market, you're in this network, you have this many people, this is how we talk to folks, this is how we communicate to new folks, and this is what you can expect in terms of revenue. So all these things are now becoming predictable and scalable. And as the course of the year comes along, you'll see both our sort of division of network services company that we run to support Althea, and then others kind of come along to build and grow that. And I just heard yesterday that our first Althea presence in Ghana, the server that we sent down there to start the network has just arrived on shore, and excited to see what also will be developing in the continent of Africa as other sort of networks are able to take this and run with it. The other piece of kind of systemizing this is, like Justin said, talking about the KeyLTE. So this is really bringing, the power of Althea's, price aware routing protocol, meaning you get to choose your sort of, your choice of latency or quality on a second by second basis, all the way down to the device level. And a big part of what we'll see, the way that this shapes out, is kind of starting with these private LTE networks. And I'm sure you've heard, private 5G, private LTE. But what this has traditionally, in a legacy sense, looked like is just another SaaS product where the farmer who wants to utilize Smart Egg, or a manufacturing company wants to roll out LTE on the factory floor, ends up just paying a monthly reoccurring cost to a cloud product that maybe goes down. They don't have a lot of control over, and it's dependent on their internet connection, which can be unstable, especially for that in the case of the farmer. So what the KeyLTE does is it brings the core components of LTE networks right into that home router, or any Althea router capable instance, so that they can, one, become like a small cell, and then provide a private LTE network south of that. So what you might see is someone's Althea router in their home. Farmer says, look, I'd like to start being able to run some sensors or my irrigation. They put up a small, inexpensive LTE antenna off the top of the silo or something like that, connected to their home router with an Ethernet cable. And then they're able to sort of interact with their devices. And then that goes right back to their local instance of a server there, as opposed to going all the way through the cloud, being captured by, someone else potentially, and then coming back to them. They have like control and autonomy over that. And then where that evolves is that once you have these sovereign private LTE networks, it's very easy then to start looking at what we can do in a public way, right? So these same LTE antennas that are providing service for a private instance can then be utilized by someone driving along on the road. And then, of course, with Althea, all traffic forwarded earns revenue for those participants in the network. So I think it's a really exciting future, and I'm really excited about the steps that we're going to see over the next few years, over the next few months, even as that starts to roll out into the Midwest of America here, and into Puerto Rico, and into Oregon, and some of the other places where we have instances where we'll be testing and iterating on that. And you can get your hands on one too. We do have a wait list right now, but we're anticipating here within a pretty short time frame that we'll be able to ship out those KeyLTE routers. So check that out at Althea website, althea.net/KeyLTE, I believe. I think, Wilk, if you want to throw that in there. And speaking along with KeyLTE, we're really focusing on fiber as well. That's a longer process in many cases, but our first fiber network that we started last year is going to be lit up here pretty soon as well. So excited to see that come to life, as Justin has said, talking about the different mediums that we can utilize with Althea's platform. And then I think the big thing that's also exciting that's coming up is we like blockchain. So with one blockchain, why not have two? So the Althea blockchain is also launching this year, probably Q1, if not maybe early Q2. So that's very exciting. That's the, as Justin was saying, it's the blockchain for telco, built to provide that reliability, the uptime, the quick transactions that, telco requires. And I think is something that we don't see outside of the Althea ecosystem in blockchain. So excited to get that underway. Justin, if you wanted to speak a little bit more about the token economics, or maybe just a little bit about, how Althea, the blockchain, is built technically, I think that would be great as well.
Yeah, so the Althea blockchain is specifically designed for telecom. And what does that mean? Because when I say telecom blockchain, I mean something fairly specific. And that is that if you take a look at like Ethereum, Bitcoin, the list gets long. Well, Bitcoin's not a programmable blockchain. So bad example, Solana, Avalanche, et cetera. All these other programmable blockchains, they are primarily financial platforms. And that means that if somebody wants to run computation X and they can pay the highest amount, they should be able to go first. And if they can't, it's considered a problem with the fee market. And this is a valid perspective. They're primarily meant for financial transactions. And in that case, a fee market is what you want. But on the Althea blockchain, we are a telecom blockchain, which means that our primary goal is not necessarily that the person with the most money gets their transaction through. The goal of the system is to ensure stability and predictability for all of its users, and to have the highest amount of reliability possible. And for this reason, we're designing a system that allows bandwidth payments, so the payments made by Althea routers, to have a predictable size and a predictable schedule, where the blockchain and the routers in the field work together in a feedback loop to ensure that there is always capacity, so that you never have, like, the next NFT drop clog up the blockchain. Nobody can do anything. That's not good. Netflix can't stop because of that. Next time there's a big Netflix special, or the next Call of Duty game weighs in at 500 gigs, the network can't go down. The blockchain and the routers have to work together in order to deal with this load and to make the best of whatever situation is presented to them. And that is the difference between a financial blockchain and a telecom blockchain. So the Althea blockchain may not come up with the financially optimum solution, because it's going to instead come up with the solution for optimum reliability. And that is why Althea needs to be independent, and this is why the Althea blockchain needs to be independent and focused on telecom needs, because this means that things like chain upgrades, parameter changes, the community as a whole will be focused on the needs of the users, normal people who are sitting at home and buying bandwidth, using this sort of mesh network billing system, which, by the way, is really crazy, because now we have all sorts of people, from emergency services to small businesses, regular people in regular homes, that are using a mesh network blockchain-backed billing system for their everyday internet, and it's just normal. And that's really cool, and that's where we want to take the next year, 2 years, 5 years, is to make it so that is the new normal, and that people can really take advantage. And that people can really take advantage of the flexibility Althea has to offer. And this comes into, so that is like the technical foundation of the Althea blockchain. Now, there's of course a lot more stuff that could theoretically be built and expanded on. Stuff like managing components of LTE, maybe SIM card registrations and stuff could be moved into the blockchain as a distributed storage system. There's all sorts of applications for telecom that you can continue to build. And I'm really excited about that in the more long term. Let's see, is there anything else you think I should include, Deborah?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, and kind of that last statement you said too, just to expand on that a little bit. I think if we look forward into the years coming, what's exciting about Althea is that, we do have a lot of regular folks that then can have the access to the financial empowerment and the financial services available on the blockchain. And so I think that'll be a, kind of a big component of what we're able to empower people with in the future, where you could take the balance that's on your router and participate easily in, the financial services available in the blockchain ecosystem. And I think the other kind of flip side of that too, that we'll see over the next few years, is different ways of investing in infrastructure. One of the exciting things about the Althea system and protocol is that we decouple the service components and incentivize those with a daily revenue share for folks that maintain and grow the network and are your 3 a.m. call if something goes wrong, these network operator role. And then that's decoupled from the per gigabyte or for forwarded traffic fee or a revenue that people that participate in the infrastructure earn, right? So, traditionally when you were going to invest or to fund legacy telco models, you have to fund the whole business, right? You can't pick and choose. It's not modular. We can't parse it. It's not fungible in any way, right? So what's exciting now, when we can start to think about decoupling these things, metering and billing them on the blockchain, we can also think about different ways of funding that infrastructure too. So I'm really excited for over the next few months in the community call, we can start to, together explore that and really see what the vision of Althea is. And I think for those folks that have been with Althea for the last couple of years, that, Justin and I and the folks here at Althea have a very long and expansive vision that, is very transformative about the way we think about internet infrastructure or infrastructure in general, right? So we'll be doing community calls for years to come as that sort of vision grows and expands and comes to life. But I think now, Will, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know we've got some questions here in the comments, and I think you have some questions that folks had submitted beforehand too. So I want to make sure we have time to get to those.
Yeah, and we do have one that's a little timely. It's from Chris with a K. I was asking about any news from Tacoma, Washington, and how people can plug in and help with installs.
Yeah, so really excited about that. For folks that maybe have some context on that, we had started out with a little pilot network in Tacoma a year or so ago, and that's kind of run with in conjunction with a nonprofit called Tacoma Cooperative Network, and some work that we've done with the University of Washington up there as well too, and their connectivity team. What that work encompassed a lot of how, and informed a lot of how we built KeyLTE. In fact, that's built on an open source protocol called Open5GS that the University of Washington was very involved with, and we've been very involved with their team. So circle back around to where we're at now, we are on the cusp of launching that network. We've secured a few vertical assets in that area too that will encompass both the Hilltop area, both of the larger zip codes in the Hilltop area, which has a footprint of roughly around 5,000 to 7,000 households. So we're really excited about that. And further, we sort of systemize out the installation process. So we're ready to grow and grow quickly there in that area. We are also hiring in that area. So if you are interested in coming on board and working with the Althea team, please reach out. And we'd love to hear from you. You can go to althea.net/careers and see the job openings that we have in that area. So Chris, we'll be seeing you in Tacoma here pretty soon.
Yeah, and there's another one from John George Bauer-Bui asking about for Althea users, how do you plan to set up payments in a way that it's simple enough for even a grandmother or grandfather to fund their accounts? Because it sounds a little bit intimidating when we're talking about the blockchain and the elements of it.
So, I mean, the answer is that, ultimately we don't feel like users should ever have to understand, all the components of blockchain and have to do that heavy lift. I don't have to understand TCP/IP to use Chrome. And that's essentially the way we think about how to interact with folks using the service. The basic way that Althea works is you load your router up with funds, and then all the metering and billing is done, behind the scenes behind the scenes. It's all transparently on the blockchain. You can go to the Block Explorer and see all of that, of those micropayments moving around as they need to. But for the user, they simply load their router up with funds, and then that gets remitted automatically to all the different this distributed infrastructure and service providers in the network. And then you get a simple text that says, hey, your funds are low, go here to load up, and then this process starts over. The Gravity Bridge, allowing folks to onboard from their Ethereum, like we use Wire right now as one of our partners, to onboard from Ethereum stablecoins into XDAI, which we currently use. It has a lot of gas currently. So the Gravity Bridge really, and its backchain mechanisms, and then moving over to the Althea blockchain will lessen the effects of that quite a bit. So that's kind of a big sort of core pillar into around the friction of like onboarding fiat type funds here in the US.
Yeah, and this is one's over for Justin, because I think there's some people who are wondering about LTE, when they hear it in the context of mobile phone networks. And Rob Suarez was asking how Althea KeyLTE works and is different from, say, what you hear about T-Mobile or Verizon.
Yeah, so KeyLTE is distinct. Okay, let's see, where do we even start? I think a good place to start will be that we are really microcell focused. So first and foremost, we are distributing software that runs on a normal Althea router. Now, the LTE protocol was designed pretty much buy-in for big carriers. So that means that somebody needs to still do the SIM registration, manage roaming, etc. And Althea will provide and Althea is providing a cloud service for that. And this is what pretty much everybody else does when you have private LTE. It's all a cloud service. It's a big cloud service. But what we're working on is making it thinner so that we manage only the things that we have to, which is essentially the SIM cards, roaming, and, well, there's two types of roaming, but roaming. So instead of sending all of your traffic up to the cloud where the cloud operator can read it and potentially manipulate it and that, we have actually taken part of the EPC, the evolved packet core, and put it into our routers. So this is actually a fairly impressive feat of sort of cross-compiling wizardry to get this piece of software that's designed to run in the cloud and put it on a tiny little router. And what that does is that all the traffic that's coming into your tower terminates and goes out onto the Althea network in your own router. So you can see it, you can manipulate it with your firewall rules. You have a lot of control. And more importantly, for our cloud EPC, so for sort of the nerve center, for sort of the nerve center of an LTE network, we are using an open source project called Open5GS, which we are contributing to, et cetera, et cetera. So this means that you can run your own private network, your own private LTE network with KeyLTE. So we're kind of providing the best of both worlds, you know, the most free implementation if you want something that's worry-free, where you can just plug in a radio and start serving users, cell phones, or, you know, fixed wireless clients, and terminate the traffic yourself using our very thin cloud service. Or you can run your own, packet core, manage your own SIM cards, and still be interoperable with the larger Althea network. So ultimately, what we're doing here is we're just sort of adding an adapter where devices that communicate with LTE in one hop of the network can pay for bandwidth, can connect to a larger Althea network and pay for bandwidth using the Althea protocol. Because that's what it all comes back to, is the ability to, in a decentralized way, connect to anybody and just pay them for bandwidth. And this creates a lot of really exciting possibilities. You know, I'm sure you've been somewhere with no service and you're literally looking at a cell tower and you're like, something's wrong with this. My phone can talk to that cell tower. I'm staring at it. I'm standing right next to it, but I have no bars. And somehow, some way, the device that I own, that I pay to charge, that I pay to operate, I can't just pay this person for bandwidth right now. And that is what Althea and KeyLTE will make possible. And this is not only great from a perspective of allowing more people to participate and sell bandwidth and allowing customers to buy bandwidth in more places, but it also actually increases the total network throughput. Because we are envisioning a world filled with many, many, many microcells where everybody can cooperate and connect to a LTE sort of micro tower. I'm sure you've seen the ones provided by big carriers. They're those little boxes that go in your house. So in a situation like that, the same spectrum can transmit much more data. And spectrum is a finite natural resource. You can't make more of it. So the smaller your towers are, the lower your transmit power. And the more people can use the same spectrum in the same physical area. So not only does Althea's pay per forward billing system and, you know, our LTE integration provide the ability to solve some of the real frustrations, you know, of sort of monopolistic telecom, but it also is simply a net improvement to the total throughput of the network because it makes better use of the available natural resources.
Yeah, that's good. And one more question, Deborah, from David Lee, asking what does a network operator for Althea do? Like, what does it entail to become a network operator?
Yeah, and I'm going to start that question off just with a little bit of context too about the kind of 4 roles in the Althea network that so that we kind of all are on the same page about what that looks like. So there's a bandwidth provider, right? So this is oftentimes going to be a middle mile, you know, a network that's offering connection, either transport back to a data center, and then they're maybe charging a few cents a gigabyte for that forwarding of bandwidth. Or you might have someone who's operating what we call a gateway, right? So it's connected to a wholesale connection to the internet, and they're earning some per gigabyte revenue. And then we have an infrastructure or a real estate provider, right? This is going to be somebody with a tall building, maybe in a fixed wireless network, or maybe it's a length of fiber. You got, 20 miles of fiber that could either be kind of a core middle mile chunk or a last mile chunk or whatever, or you're in a fixed wireless network and you have some extra antennas on your roof, right? And those also get a cent or two of per gigabyte revenue for all that traffic that's going through the network. And then we have a NOC, right, which is a network operations center. These are sort of the the folks helping with the planning, the partnering. They maybe do things like provide phone service and support. These kind of overall arching centers. And right now, Hawk Networks, which is Althea's C corporation, does a lot of that work. But we envision more kind of NOC type of operations growing and developing with the Althea's growth. And then the last type of role here that we were talking about is the network operator, right? So the network operator is going to work with that NOC, and maybe they're going to take more of a larger role and, essentially run that network as an ISP. We do have a lot of partners that are our existing ISPs that are rolling out with Althea that operate as the network operator, that kind of local person that responds to service calls, plans the network, maybe does some advertising. And then we have network operators that are they're not taking quite as much of an active role. Maybe they're just involved with the making partnerships with a municipality or, providing nonprofit connections or something like that, right? So it really, it'll be interesting to see the different kinds of varieties of network operators and what all that will look like. But what we kind of found post 2019 too was that they all, sort of needed that strong partnership with the NOC. So we can envision less or more passive types of network operators that aren't quite as materially involved or involved in a more of a part-time way, as long as you have a strong NOC partnership.
Okay. We did have a question just now from Ronald on YouTube, but also there's been some rumblings or inquiries on Discord about from people in remote areas using Starlink and asking, what our opinion is on that, or if there's any infrastructure mixing and matching that could happen in that area.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this is, so Starlink is more of a legacy type model, which dead ends, right? So this is a lot of the problem with the internet as it is right now, because they value capture in a monthly payment rather than having open access infrastructure. And that really, limits themselves where they're not able to capture any existing revenue that could happen should that network be shared. And then it also limits, of course, the end user that they're bound by terms of service that don't allow you to, grow that network organically at all. So really, this is one of the main pain points of a legacy type model. And unfortunately, we see Starlink kind of perpetuating, that model where you're essentially just dead ending the network, right? It can only go as far as your home. And then, there's no physical reason why that infrastructure can't be shared. There's no logistical reason why that can't be shared. Really, it's because you don't have a proper metering and billing system and protocol and a blockchain made for telco. So I think we'll see the obvious conclusion over time being that the blockchain for telco and a proper metering and billing system aligns legacy networks and users, and everyone actually thrives a lot more. So what's exciting about that is once that sort of inevitable conclusion becomes more transparent, I think there will be really no reason why that won't crescendo to the other models.
Yeah, and on the blockchain front, there's been a few questions, although I guess we kind of covered it earlier, but just asking when the LK is asking when the next testnet is, but although I think I can kind of chime in on that because we were talking about the end of Q1 or early Q2, and those things are probably there's gonna be a little overlap there.
Yeah, the next testnet for Althea blockchain will likely be right before lunch, because we've taken a lot of the technical complexity out of it. There's no more gravity bridge in there, so that means that it's much easier to test, and sort of needs less of a big test cycle. So now we're just really left with the final run up to production.
Yep. Soon, trademark.
Yeah. All righty. Do we have any? Let's see. Any other inquiries here from our viewers?
I think we have some questions about here in this list that we have from.
Yeah. It's a question about if we have any other besides Ghana. If there are any other sort of international deployments envisioned on the horizon.
We have been, for at least our kind of NOC and partners, been very focused on the U.S. It's it's where we all are. It's where we all live. It's also a market that's growing really rapidly. There's a lot of investment into fiber infrastructure right now, so it's been a really ideal fit for where Althea's at. We did do some early experiments in networks in Nigeria and Colombia, and I think one of the things that we found was that there's a lot of challenges to like power and electrical grids and other types of infrastructure that precluded the build out, especially when we talk in terms of like CapEx, right? So you have to be very CapEx efficient and OpEx efficient too, in more emerging markets, and that it's very difficult despite Justin's heroic wizardry of getting Althea working in these $20 Althea routers. I mean, like the Herculean effort was amazing. And a lot of the product market fit actually made a lot of sense there. Like it worked, but when your power is off more than it's on, it's just a tough market to really grow in. So that being said, I think we will see that trajectory continue to grow. There's definitely a lot of folks interested. We are building in Puerto Rico. We have some great partners down there. We just announced the partnership with Hub Networks in support of the Puerto Rico 5G zone. But Hub Networks also has reach into Latin and America and some of the other islands there too. So I think that's probably also a good natural fit for Althea to grow. Puerto Rico definitely has really shown itself as an anchor of innovation, and we're really excited to build together down there.
And EJ was just asking, if you're using Althea and you deplete the funds on your account, what happens?
Ooh, that's a fun question. Yeah, so this is, Althea is built to be permissionless and essentially, run itself, right? It's, it's not a centralized network, but so router to router, they throttle the connection down to a network specific free tier, right? So that can be set by the NOC and network operations and the network operator, for each particular network. So you can set it somewhat high, maybe 5 megabits per second or something like that, or even 10 or something like that. Or we can, when most of our networks are right around that 3 megabits per second. So it's enough that you can write an email and do basic things on the internet, but, you're really not enjoying the full, the full suite of internet streaming and everything like that. And then as soon as you add funds, that unthrottles the connection. And then you have the full, one of the great things about Althea too, is that you have the full capacity of what your hardware will give you, which, to us makes a lot of sense. There's no reason to sort of, artificially limit people's connection, and then charge them a rental fee. That's like, it really, perverts the incentives. And that now your infrastructure carrier really has the incentive of giving you the worst possible connection, because you're going to pay the same monthly fee regardless, that they can get away with without you switching. Whereas with an Althea model, you have, you give the very best that hardware can provide, and then the infrastructure provider also has an incentive to continue to improve that, right? Because they're getting a somewhat of a metered connection, right? So there's a natural alignment between folks that use the internet and those that are providing.
Yeah, and We were just talking about international markets a moment ago, but and Mark was asking what characteristics you look for in a market when deciding on a potential future Althea deployment.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two ways of looking at this. We do see a lot of folks that, are just feeling the pain in the community that they live in and want to set up an Althea network. And, we haven't, I think, found a network where that hasn't been financially feasible to have happen, right? There's lots of different configurations that can make that CapEx really efficient. And I think that's what's so exciting is really you can build an Althea network anywhere and have it basically work and make sense. But for our sort of network services, side of things, we tend to look at, areas that, maybe have some underserved components, whether that's folks that have trouble accessing in terms of cost or just friction. One of the really, really big surprises of all the last 4 years of building these was that a lot of folks didn't access the internet because they didn't have banking. So they couldn't easily pay their Comcast bill, or it was too expensive, or they got behind and they now owe $400. And that was too big of a hurdle for them to get back into the cadence of paying for their internet bill. So oftentimes we can actually, we have new markets and can serve more people than a legacy network can, just because of the pay-as-you-go kind of model that we have. Or there are kind of these areas in the U.S. that maybe have 20 to 40,000 people that sort of are surrounded by some rural communities. That's also a really great fit for us. We fit in well there. But I think we'll see, Tacoma is an urban network. I think I'm excited to see us, grow and kind of beyond where we started.
Yeah, on that note, actually, there was just a question about how viable Althea is in more densely populated rural areas, or just, I guess, densely populated areas in general, where there are already legacy wired providers, like Frontier, for example.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons why we actually have a really compelling, and actually, here I am in Classic and and Althea's done quite well. And despite there being 4 or 5 actually really great options, and there's fiber here. But there's a couple of reasons why we succeed. One is that we do have we're always community participation. I mean, if you are an Althea user, you're an Althea participant. You're part of that community of networks. It really is this sort of revolution of how we, want to see the internet instead of being part of the way things were. So I think that's incredibly powerful. It's your dollars go to support that community. That's exciting. And then the other piece of it is, again, kind of the service being just because it's fiber or just because it's Comcast or whatever doesn't mean it's necessarily good. You have a lot of issues with upload speed, quality of service, and these kinds of things that affect your user experience more so than just even if we just look at the download speed. And then the other thing too is, like I said, we are able to be viable to and provide service to more subscribers and customers from a payment friction standpoint as well. And I think that's really powerful too. I mean, I think one of the interesting things to me is that there are so many prepaid phone users in the US, right? And I think there's something like 60, 70 million prepaid phone customers in the US. And I think that's probably gives us somewhat of an insight into how many people are just not able to access, the subscription-based services like on a CenturyLink or Comcast or, Verizon or whatever, just because they can't, they don't have the credit or whatever this is that's precluding them from being part of and utilizing the internet. And so I think, there's a huge market opportunity for us in urban places because of that too.
Yeah, well, that is almost just about brings us to 45 minutes, and I think we've got all the questions here. Justin, do you have any final words, or from anyone watching, any final questions they'd like to chip in?
There's one more question you see in the chat.
Oh, how easy is the onboarding process if I wanted to start a node, for example?
Yeah, so how easy the onboarding process is really depends a lot on the medium of communication that you choose. So if you want to start a node in an existing Althea network, it is as easy as booting up an Althea router, setting it up like you would set up any device. You go to its dashboard and click a few buttons, and having a connection to a neighbor that's already running Althea. And exactly how you make this connection, well, that is the ISP construction part of Althea. And this is really where we hope that LTE will help us, make this easier, because obviously LTE has a much longer range in terms of miles, or even dozens of miles if you have access to the right frequencies. And then any device within range can just hop on, communicate, and provide that connection that you need to either buy or sell bandwidth. But for most of our just pure home internet users, they're going to be fiber or fixed wireless. And we're looking forward to a future where people have a mix of fiber and fixed wireless to sort of optimize fiber and fixed wireless, and perhaps even fixed LTE, because our dynamic routing system can really take great advantage of it. And this deserves its own video. It's actually really fun to look at a big tree of a network and be like, okay, well, how many nodes need crosslinks before you start, before 80% of the network has some sort of failover? And the answer is a lot fewer than you think. Anyways, so it's really cool, and I would like to show that off someday. But I think that's my answer to that question.
Yes. Speaking of KeyLTE and LTE types of things, we do have some little video snippets that are being available as well. Well, did we publish one this week, or is that?
We published the first one this week, and then there'll be another one later this week, actually tomorrow, I believe, coming out.
Yeah, so if you are not already subscribed to Althea, we'd love to have you on board, and you can, watch those little, 5-minute videos about KeyLTE and kind of the vision there. We did also do kind of an early instruction video, myself along with Spencer, who is part of our team that works on the LTE protocol. You can catch up there as well if you want to kind of deep dive into how LTE networks work and why they're important and valuable. But yeah, and then please do, if you're interested in getting one of the first KeyLTE routers as well, we have a wait list. Please go ahead and sign up, and we'll make sure you are part of that first batch. And I think if that's all the questions, it's probably a good time to wrap up, and we'll hopefully get back into a regular cadence of doing these monthly too. I really appreciate everybody who showed up to be a part of this today. This was a really great discussion.
Yeah. Although before we sign off, there was just one last thing. Would it be possible for a provider to provide IoT services over Althea, which?
Yeah. So I think, kind of what we were sharing with the earlier roadmap is that's one of the first use cases is going to be a private LTE network that interacts with IoT. Metering and billing in a kind of a more of a public sense where you can charge for that is probably a later iteration. But now we've been working with a few companies on developing some of the IoT specifically for LTE. One of the interesting things too is that right now most of the, like, if you have an egg sensor or you have a water sensor or something like that, that's going to be over LoRa protocol, which is different than the LTE protocol and isn't quite as interoperable. It really only works on that particular frequency. And so what we're excited to do is also kind of have to work with some partners to develop, sensors and things that work and other IoT that works natively in LTE. So you really can get these holistic networks that are, IoT from a private perspective, IoT from, a public and metered perspective, where you can, sell bandwidth, these kinds of things, right? Then really have that network just be holistic and one access point, one ENB on the home that does all of those things, and then also interacts with phones and with carriers and things like that too. So that's how we start building that interoperable future, is one step and one sensor and one farm at a time.
All right, so that just about wraps everything up. The links that we've just mentioned in the last few minutes, I'm going to add to the video description in just a few minutes for anyone watching, and that's about it from me. And
I think that's a wrap. Thanks so much, Will and Justin, and thanks to everyone for being here and being part of the journey with us. And look forward to talking with y'all next month. Feel free to join the conversation in Discord and Twitter. We're always happy to talk with you. Right now.
all right.